Trump snaps, Russia is being choked, and the clock is ticking. Washington has unleashed a sanctions hammer that could crush Russia's war economy within days. Trump has given the green light to a brutal bipartisan bill. Countries buying cheap Russian oil are now in the crosshairs. China, India, Brazil, nobody is safe. US forces are storming Russian tankers in international waters. Panicking Russians are captured. On the battlefield, chaos explodes. In Kupiansk, Russian troops abandoned inside a hospital are wiped out. Pro-Kremlin Z-bloggers are melting down. The karma strikes from the sky. A helicopter carrying a Russian millionaire tied to oil and gas logistics crashes and burns. The money that fueled the war falls with him. Sanctions, seizures, strikes, collapse. Is this the moment Russia finally breaks? Let's break down what's happening right now. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. Maria Farafonova here with the latest updates. Russia is being strangled by sanctions. Trump has given the green light to a new powerful bill, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham said. The document could be brought to a vote as early as next week.
After a very productive meeting today with President Trump on a variety of issues, he greenlit the bipartisan Russia sanctions bill that I have been working on for months with Senator Blumenthal and many others. This will be well-timed, as Ukraine is making concessions for peace and Putin is all talk, continuing to kill the innocent.
According to him, the bill would allow Trump to punish countries that buy cheap Russian oil, thereby fueling Putin's war machine.
This bill would give President Trump tremendous leverage against countries like China, India, and Brazil to incentivize them to stop buying the cheap Russian oil that provides the financing for Putin's bloodbath against Ukraine. I look forward to a strong bipartisan vote, hopefully as early as next week.
Trump has really lost his patience. U.S. forces are now storming Russian Shadow Fleet tankers. According to the U.S. Southern Command, a sanctioned stateless motor tanker was detained by the Department of Defense in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security. Southern Command released video of the operation. It is noted that the vessel MT Sophia was operating in international waters and engaged in illegal activity in the Caribbean Sea. The U.S. Coast Guard is escorting it to the United States.
Through Operation Southern Spear, the Department of War is unwavering in its mission to crush illicit activity in the Western Hemisphere. We will defend our homeland and restore security and strength across the Americas.
U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem said the tanker is also linked to Venezuela. Analyst Emmanuel Belostino added that vessel may be carrying around 2 million barrels of Mary crude loaded at Venezuela's Joe's oil terminal in late December. Earlier, it became known that American troops also boarded the oil tanker Marinera, which Russian media say Putin had tried to protect by dispatching submarine and warships. The vessel, formerly known as Bella 1, was sailing under the Panamanian flag toward Venezuela and, according to Washington, was involved in transporting Iranian oil under U.S. sanctions. After U.S. forces attempted to stop the ship in the Caribbean, the crew painted the Russian tricolor on the hull and told the U.S. Coast Guard they were under Russian control. The New York Times reports that Moscow then sent an official demand to Washington to halt the pursuit. The sanctioned Bella 1 later appeared in Russia's official ship registry under the new name Marinera. But hiding didn't work. Consequences are already closing in on Russia. It appears Trump's anger is only intensifying. The U.S. Attorney General also hinted that Americans could see several more tankers violating sanctions.
The Department of Justice is tracking several additional vessels for potential similar action. Any person on any vessel who fails to comply with orders from the Coast Guard or other federal officials will be held accountable to the full extent of the law.
Panic has erupted inside the Russian army on the Ukrainian front. Ukraine's Air Force delivered a brutal strike on occupiers hiding inside a hospital building in Kupiansk, sending shockwaves through pro-Kremlin Z-bloggers who are now openly melting down.
Subsequently, several Z channels caught the propagandists in their lies, claiming that encircled Russian soldiers were actually still in the hospital. The hospital was ours. The enemy really was dismantling it all last week. The enemy was targeting our guys who were simply abandoned there.
Russian channels are in chaos. They admit that for more than a month, the command of the West Krypin has failed to break the encirclement and rescue Russian troops trapped in central Kupiansk. This is how karma works. In Russia, a helicopter belonging to a Russian millionaire has crashed. His business helped bankroll the aggression against Ukraine. The helicopter became entangled in cables at a ski resort. The flight was unauthorized and engine icing was cited as a cause of the crash. Those killed include Ilyas Gimatudinov, a millionaire and founder of the transport company Tatran.com, and Elmir Konyakov, the company's vehicle fleet manager. Tatran.com specializes in cargo transportation, including for Russia's oil and gas sector, profits from which the Kremlin uses to finance the war against Ukraine. Meanwhile, the situation on the front line does not look good for Russia. Ukraine's armed forces have repelled a massive Russian assault near Pokrovsk, and this is far from the last piece of bad news for the enemy. More details on what is unfolding along the line of contact coming up next.
The Russians have lost another oil depot. Telegram channels are showing videos of a fire in Stary Oskol, Belgorod region. In less than a week, from January 2nd to January 7th, Ukrainian drone forces managed to strike 9 strategic targets on Russian territory and another 7 in temporarily occupied areas of Ukraine.
The latest strikes by Ukraine's defense forces on the territory of the occupying country demonstrate the continued success of the tactic of targeting oil refineries in the Russian Federation, with the aim of reducing the occupiers' ability to finance active military operations in Ukraine.
Not just by air, fighters of the 225th Separate Assault Regiment have eliminated more than 2 brigades of the Russian army in 2025 alone.
Just in the past 24 hours, the occupying forces have lost about 1,400 personnel. The total losses of the Russian occupation forces in 2025 are estimated by the Ukrainian intelligence community at approximately 450,000. Therefore, we can say that the losses of the occupation army are catastrophic, even for the Russian army. It is particularly noteworthy that the total number of contract soldiers in the year 2025 is significantly, indeed remarkably less, according to the Russian side's very own official estimates, than the substantial losses of Russian troops in the ongoing conflict in Ukraine.
More cancelled contracts of Russians, as Ukrainian defenders call what is happening, are being reported from the Volchansk direction.
At the moment, in the Volchansk direction, the main fighting is concentrated in the area of the Volchansk farmsteads. The Ukrainian defense forces have carried out a series of successful counteroffensive actions on other sections of the front. In particular, the settlements of Sofiyivka and Andreyivka in the Sumy region have been brought under control.
Ukrainian paratroopers thwarted a Russian assault in the Pokrovsk direction. The enemy threw not only manpower but also tanks and armored vehicles into the meat grinder.
Over the past day, according to reports from the General Staff of the Ukrainian Defense Forces, there have been more than 77 clashes in the Pokrovsk direction, the highest number, and the main efforts of the occupiers are focused on the flanks of the Pokrovsk front. They are trying to break through the positions of the Ukrainian defense forces near the settlement of Rodinske in the Dobropilia direction and accordingly near the settlement of Hryshin.
The GUR fighters carried out a successful operation in the Zaporizhzhia direction. A Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance group entered the enemy's rear near the Kakovka reservoir. During the combat mission, the military intelligence operatives eliminated 2 occupiers, wounded 2 others, and captured 2 more, later obtaining valuable information from them. The occupiers do not choose life in Huliaipol. In this footage, 2 Russians, after being wounded by the Ukrainian armed forces, finished each other off, most likely unable to withstand the emotional pressure on the battlefield.
At the moment, the occupiers are using the difficult terrain to redeploy their personnel in this direction. This significantly complicates the ability of Ukraine's defense forces to neutralize the assault groups of the Russian occupiers. The fighting is taking place directly in the settlement, but the information from the Russian occupiers about establishing full control over the settlement does not correspond to reality. It should be noted that the intensification in the Huliaipol direction is being used by the occupiers solely for informational and political purposes. They are in dire need of demonstrating tactical successes along the line of contact.
The United Kingdom has confirmed the delivery to Ukraine of 13 Raven air defense missile systems and 2 Greyhawk prototypes. In addition, the delivery of additional Greyhawk systems is expected in the near future. This is reported by the Ukraine Defense Journal, which adds that the systems are intended to provide short-range protection against drones, aircraft, and helicopters operating near the front line.
Putin has instructed the government, the central bank and regional authorities to restore the pace of Russia's economic growth in 2026 and to increase tax collection. Both goals are hardly achievable, experts say, including those loyal to the authorities. More on how Russia's economy is sliding into the abyss coming up.
To restore the economy and increase taxes, these are the 2 goals that the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has set for the government, the central bank and regional authorities for 2026. Such tasks are barely achievable, as even experts loyal to the authorities admit.
By the end of 2025, it was already clear that the Russian economy was facing major problems. And if, let's put it this way, in the middle of 2025, only a few commentators, who weren't even opposition figures, were talking about a technical recession, then by the end of 2025, even economists close to the authorities, such as the Center for Macroeconomic Analysis and Short-Term Forecasting, headed by the younger brother of Russia's defense minister Belousov, were already saying that there would be a recession in 2026.
Since the beginning of 2025, Russia's GDP growth has been steadily slowing down. It was 1.4% in the first quarter, 1.1% in the second, and only 0.6% in the third. Russian economists predicted that the economy would enter 2026 with zero growth and inevitable stagnation across all sectors except the military.
For the fourth quarter in a row, Russia was in the negative. Most likely, well, I think they'll officially report plus 0.1, but in reality, it was a negative. And as for 2026, yes, it's likely that the entire year will see GDP decline, meaning production is falling. Statements that some sectors are showing success, well, maybe a few isolated ones will, but overall the negatives outweigh them.
A downturn, at least for the first and second quarters of 2026, instead of the 1% growth that Putin is ordering the Ministry of Economy to achieve, has long been predicted by Russian economists.
People have gotten used to paying not only with cash these days, but also with credit cards. Previously, for 25 years before this, there was never an extra charge in Russia for paying with credit cards instead of cash. Now, that's a thing of the past. Paying by credit card now means you have to pay a tax. According to calculations by Sberbank of Russia, as announced by its head German Gref, this means a loss of 200 billion rubles for Russian citizens.
To fill the budget with revenue to finance Putin's war, the authorities, of course, plan to take it from the pockets of Russians.
This will lead to more and more businesses shutting down. There is already a trend of businesses closing in Russia, and the statistics show that a great many businesses are shutting down. And if there is an even greater increase in fiscal pressure, as Putin is talking about, it will mean that even more different enterprises will be forced to close.
Starting in 2025, Russia will begin to feel the first consequences of tightening by the EU in the form of fuel shortages at gas stations. In 2026, it is quite possible that salaries will not be paid due to a lack of funds, which will lead to the shutdown of production in most industries.
The start of 2026 is a real catastrophe for Russia. Oil refineries are burning, power plants are in flames, entire districts are left without electricity, and Moscow is bracing for a total blackout. So what lies ahead for this failing quasi-empire? To put it mildly, the outlook is grim. Here are the details.
Russia is waking up more and more often without electricity, heat, or any sense of stability. Almost every day, there are new strikes on the energy infrastructure. Massive oil refineries and numerous thermal power plants. It's quite a significant mess. And again, oil refineries. Entire districts are losing electricity, and along with it,
the process of heating, which involves the transfer of thermal energy to increase temperature, is a fundamental concept.
Accidents at thermal power plants, fires at oil refineries, and large-scale blackouts. These are no longer isolated incidents, but a systemic pattern in Russia.
Everything that mirrors the war onto the territory of the Russian Federation can undoubtedly be considered a success. Ukraine has done exactly what Russia did not expect.
In many regions of Russia, a power plant shutdown means not only darkness, but also cold. People are left without heating and hot water, even in places where there have been no strikes on infrastructure.
If you had never done it before, filling an entire bathtub with snow just to go to the bathroom so it would melt and you'd have at least some water. If you always had that, then everything was always fine for you. I came to get water so I could wash the dishes.
But if such failures happen even without Ukraine's involvement, the question arises, what's going on with Russia's energy infrastructure?
If they're still somehow managing with the cities, Russians try to resolve the issue, somehow carry out repairs as quickly as possible. How well that works out for their energy infrastructure is another question. But when it comes to villages, obviously, villages aren't electorally important. Not many people live there, so Putin, excuse the slang, just doesn't care.
What's surprising is that even in Russia, people understand that their situation is far from ideal.
If we carefully look at the official information about precisely how worn out our essential utility system is right now, it becomes rather profoundly alarming. And if you then add significant external impacts to that, honestly, it truly doesn't inspire much optimism.
Oil refineries are a particularly vulnerable point. They support not only Russia's economy, but also its formidable army.
Significant problems frequently arise both during essential repairs at large-scale oil refineries, because that particular process invariably requires a substantial amount of financial investment and a very great deal of valuable time to complete, and also with the complex task of repairing the intricate logistics networks, which often has a profound and far-reaching kind of house of cards effect. Consequently, when you cause one critical element to collapse or fail, all the other interconnected elements tend to collapse simultaneously at precisely the same time.
Repairs drag on, reserves are insufficient, and the winter period only amplifies the consequences of accidents.
These systemic problems with energy in the Russian Federation have become extremely difficult to solve, both because of money and because of the lack of all the necessary components for repairs, since some of them are, again, import dependent. In other words, Russia does not produce them itself, but buys them from abroad. And this is where, once again, the sanctions mechanisms come into play.
Of course, the bunker dweller spares no money for war, but when it comes to heating the homes of his citizens, he is very stingy.
Naturally, the level of discontent is rising, and this discontent is no longer just in rural areas where blackouts happen. Now, this negativity is actually concentrating in the big cities.
An energy crisis, even without Ukraine's involvement, is becoming a new reality for Russians. It's expensive, risky, and increasingly unmanageable.
Just one day, say, with temperatures at minus 20 degrees, in conditions where there is no heating, can destroy the entire system. So we really hope, of course, that it won't come to that. It's important to monitor specifically to ensure that the heating plants aren't damaged, especially if, for example, the strikes on thermal power stations continue.
When blackouts and lack of heat occur even without external interference, it speaks to the state of the system. For Russia, such failures are increasingly becoming the norm, and with the involvement of friendly drones, it's turning into a completely new reality.
That's all for now. Stay with us to be the first to know what's happening right now. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.